I've never been able to get into the Valis franchise. That's not a recent thing either. I played Valis games on the Genesis, Super Nintendo, and TurboGrafx CD back when those were the new hot systems. The games always played as bog-standard action games to me. I know the series has its followers, and the conclusion I came to was that it was fans of the character, not the games. Mugen Senshi Valis is not exactly the first game in the series. Originally, it was a computer game, and the Famicom version basically recreated the game from the ground up. It was changed from a straightforward action game on computers to a more exploration-focused action-adventure game on the Famicom. Very similar to the other action-adventure games that we've been seeing lately. Before we get into the game itself, I have to mention a bit about how it was promoted. A very short cartoon was created and distributed with magazines to try to sell people on Valis. It's pretty bad, as you'd expect for something created to sell a video game, but it's interesting to note who made it. The director was one Hideaki Anno, who would later find greater success directing a Godzilla movie and some other stuff. In the game, you are Yuko, an average Japanese schoolgirl who one day finds a magic sword. She has been chosen to be the Warrior of Valis, a hero who has to defeat an evil king and restore peace to a fantasy kingdom. The game starts off with you as Yuko in Tokyo, and you have to defeat the monsters that are invading the city. You attack by pressing B, and that fires a little beam out the tip of the sword. That effect will improve as you progress through the game and get stronger swords. The final sword you get is the titular Valis. On this first stage, Yuko has to wander the streets and defeat 3 big monsters. The streets are a real maze in Valis, and what you'll really need to do is find a map. You can press up to go in between almost any gap between buildings, and sometimes an arrow will flash down, letting you know that there's a path there. You can also enter some buildings, though not many of them are marked as things you can enter. You can try to draw your own map, but you're going to have a tough time of it because the streets in Valis curve. On top of that, the orientation isn't consistent. You're not always looking at things from the same side, so it's very easy to get lost as the roads curve back on themselves, or you wind up going in the direction that you just came from. That's why you need the map. Once you have that, you can press Start, select the map, and then press B, and you'll get a layout of the area. Before you go fight the bosses, you'll also want some power-ups. You can find grenades and boomerang shots. Using one of these from the menu changes your attack for about 3 seconds. Another thing to watch out for in the doors? Some places have drinks that restore 2 bars of life. One useful thing to be aware of is that you can re-enter doors as many times as you like, so you can stock up on power-ups and refill your life. The first 2 mini-bosses are located in a narrow street, and that's a good opportunity to point out one of Valis' biggest problems. Enemies spawn at the edge of the screen, and they can often spawn right on top of Yuko. And they hit pretty hard too, so you'll have to soak a lot of unavoidable hits and watch your life bar drain away from them. If you enter the alley from the wrong direction on this one, the boss appears directly on top of you. On the other hand, if you go the long way around, it'll appear on the opposite side of the screen from you. I'd recommend using grenades and just throwing them as fast as you can. The other boss is located at the end of this street. Again, I'd use grenades and just blast away. There is a bug here though. You're supposed to be able to continue to the right and move on with the game, but if that was the 3rd boss that you killed, the exit doesn't open up. Instead, you have to leave the street that you're on and go back in. With that done, you can go to this fountain where you're transformed into your armor and taken away to a magical kingdom. And this kingdom is even more confusing. Valis becomes much more open-ended at this point. You can freely wander around and go back and forth to different sections of the game. Though for your own sanity, I'd recommend staying at this one until you've got it completed. The houses here have a lot more power-ups for you. There's a new sword that doubles your strength. a shield that makes you invincible for about 15 seconds, and items that will let you pass later sections of the game. If you wander into some areas, you just start taking damage. There's no visual indicator that they're different. You have to locate a cape elsewhere on the map before you can go on. You can also find this pot, which will carry healing water. Naturally, you can use that to recover life, but if you continue, you do have to refill it. This hammer will let you talk to the strange faces that are scattered around. They'll give you some exposition, and they'll also tell you how close you are to the boss of the area. And this is as far as I got. The boss is locked up in a house somewhere on the west side of town, but I couldn't identify which door to go into. Another thing to be aware of here are the herbs. They'll fully refill your life, but the person who hands them out doesn't show up in the buildings unless you have 3 bars of life or less. That does mean if you're weak and close to one of those spots, you'll probably want to take a couple intentional hits so that you can refill your life bar. The action in Valis is not great. Although technically you can jump on top of some things to platform around, it's pretty rare that you'll want to do it, and that just makes all of the areas flat, straight lines. The way that the paths are structured is also really annoying. I'll run up and crouch to hit an enemy and find myself going through a path. And there are instances where the game just suddenly floods you with enemies. If you're standing in the wrong spot when that happens, it's going to take a lot of life. It also kind of bothers me how all the enemies take multiple hits to defeat. I could understand an escalation that occurs where there are some enemies that are tougher than others, and as you get a sword, you could take them out easier. But on the first stage, you have to swing a lot to defeat even the weakest of enemies. So fighting monsters isn't fun, and exploring the confusing maps isn't fun, and that's really all there is in Valis, so it's not a very fun game to play. I've tried giving it a fair shake in the past, and always quit as it became more and more frustrating. It does look nice, and the music's pretty good. If I got the game in 1987, and I didn't have a whole bunch of other games to play, I'd probably enjoy it just fine. But I don't see myself revisiting this game. It's just too annoying. Maybe someday I'll give the sequels another chance, but this is the only Valis game we're going to be seeing in this project.